Oh, hey, everyone. Is this on? Hello? Oh, there you go. Hey, everyone. It is time to get started. So if you want to have a seat. Hey, Tilly. Robert, you need to sit down. All right, everyone, I think we're all ready to get started. So for those of you who haven't met John yet, this is John Magnuson from New Day Resources here in Tennessee, or there in Tennessee. I'll let him introduce himself. So let's get started.
Well, hey, folks. It is good to get to be with you. Derek and I have been talking for actually a matter of months about an opportunity to come up and just kind of share some things with you, and I'm glad that it worked out. There was an event happening just down the road, and so I was able to stop by and do that this morning, and here we are. You know, he introduced me as from New Day Resources, but I'm from North Boulevard Church of Christ. I'm a church guy. So North Boulevard is in Murfreesboro, and I met some folks that have some Murfreesboro experience back there. And so we're a congregation. We're about, I've been saying we're 75 years old for 5 years now. So I guess I'm about to start saying we're about 80 years old now. But congregation has been there a while. We're near a university, and we were kind of planted there for that purpose to reach out to the students. And so it's a vibrant congregation. Good things are happening, and I'll share a little bit of our history as I go along. But Derek wanted me to talk about the value of small groups for churches that want to make disciples. Growing churches. I'll just start with that. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go through some of this stuff. So if I repeat a few things tomorrow morning, y'all give me a pass. It'll be new for the people that we talk to in the morning. But essentially growing churches all around the world, small groups are really important. And the reason why small groups are so important is because it's one of the ways that we encourage every member of the church to own the mission of the church for themselves. And we're going to talk about what that mission is a lot tomorrow morning, but I'll go ahead and state it now so you'll have some context for what we're talking about. Well, let me jump right in. And that is blinking, by the way, this screen back here in the back. So I don't know if these are blinking, but that one is definitely blinking. The church that I'm a part of, as I said, it's an 80-year-old church, but about 15 years ago, we sat down, looked each other in the eye, and we had a conversation. And we realized there's two big questions that we need to get the answer to. And it really comes from this guy named Peter Drucker, who is really a business consultant. But he says there's really only two questions any institution needs to ask. What's your business? What are you here for? And how you doing? And so we asked that question. And so it forced us to figure out, what are we actually doing here? We feel like the Lord's called us to do something, but what is it? And, we're in the South. There's a lot of Church of Christ folks down in the South, and we were doing a good job. We were a good Church of Christ. We had all the stuff that you would want to have as a Church of Christ. And so we were doing well. And so we were asking ourselves, though, but what's the thing Jesus wanted the church to do? And we thought about the Great Commission, and so there's an expression, it goes like this, that Jesus's final words need to be our first priority. So the idea became, and we will talk more about that tomorrow, so sound surprised when you hear it, but basically the Great Commission, he said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore go, make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and I will be with you as you're doing all of that. So he could have said anything he wanted to right there at the end, but he was kind of given he was telling the disciples, this is what I want you to do. And we felt like he was saying that to us today at the church that I was at. So we had to ask the question, are we making disciples? And we started talking about this idea of discipleship. And I remember being in our preacher's office, and he was really sold on this idea of we need to embrace discipleship. And I said, I think so too, but what is discipleship? He goes, I don't know. But if we ever start doing it, I think we'll know we're doing it. which I thought was a really intriguing thing because this guy had a PhD from, a big university. He's a pretty smart fella. And, so he was calling us to do something that we didn't really know what we were doing. It just seemed like it was the correct answer to that question. Because here's the truth. The church does a lot of things. I mean, we do more than just disciple people, tell people evangelistically and help people to grow as followers of Jesus. We do more than that. We feed hungry people. We care for one another. We do a million things. We visit each other in the hospital. We share life together. We do all of those things. But as we thought about it, we thought, what's the one thing if we don't do it, no one else will? And what we realized, the one thing that if we don't tell other people about Jesus, the Lions Club, the Kiwanis Club, the whatever club around town that does good things, and I think all those organizations do, but they're not going to tell people about Jesus. That's our job. And then we looked around the church and we asked ourselves, well, how are we doing? I mean, we were getting, like most churches do, the kids, that we baptize, that we raise, and we get to see them get baptized. But we were wondering, what about all of our coworkers? What about, our nieces and nephews that just kind of disappeared from the church somewhere over the course of their life? What about for our teenagers? What about their classmates? What about all these people? Is God calling us to do something? And so that became the answer to what's our business? It was to make disciples. How's business? We're not sure we're doing real good. So we started this adventure of trying to find tools so that we could train our people to go tell their friends and neighbors about Jesus. And you think there would be a bunch because at one time there really were. I know y'all will remember this. At one time we had the Joel Miller film strips. We had a great tool. I remember my grandfather, so there's about 6 or 7 of us cousins. When my grandfather passed away, what we all wanted was his Joel Miller film strips with his projector, because we all had the memory of that bowl of candy sitting on top of that, viewer. He would invite all the neighborhood kids to come over and, hey, watch this video, and he'd give them a piece of candy just for watching the video. Sounds a little creepy now when you say it, but it didn't back then. That's just the world changed a little bit, right? But when we all had that tool, what it allowed all of us to do is we could own the mission for ourselves. We could be the church Monday through Saturday because we knew what to do. Invite our friends and neighbors to watch the Joel Miller film strips. And maybe some people in this room actually, that's part of your family's story that, somebody in your past, came to Christ because of those videos. A wonderful tool. But at some point, that tool, maybe it just got a little dated. We know that happens, and nobody updated it. And then everything really kind of became about what we did on Sunday morning. So we went from being this very evangelistic group to this group of people that really relied on this Sunday morning event to really kind of do everything. And we have good Bible classes, so we have ways of helping people grow and mature. But it really became a matter of inviting people to church as opposed to telling them about Jesus. Now, I love inviting people to church, but I think there's a deeper step we can take, a bigger step we can take, and that's telling our friends and neighbors about Jesus. And that's the mission all of us need to pursue. It's not just for the preacher or the elders or folks like that. Like, it's every one of us. And here's why that's important, because every one of us is surrounded by a unique group of people. Like your friends, you're surrounded by a group, and then he's got a group of people, and you have a level of influence with them. And if we can equip ourselves and create opportunities, I am getting to small groups. If we can equip ourselves to be able to tell that story, then these churches are full again, because we're watching what God will do when we lift him up. When we share him with friends, neighbors, coworkers, it's pretty exciting to see what happens in their lives, because they're looking for him too. They may not know it, and they may come to different points in their life, but everybody's looking for something. And when you help them find themselves living in the story of Jesus, living in God's story, the story they were always meant to live in, well, that's pretty exciting. And that really is how the church grows. Now, why don't we talk about small groups as a tool? Small groups are a vital tool for all of that because you can really become the church on your street. You can become the light. You can become the city on a hill. Your house can become the place on your street where everybody knows, well, that's the guy that prays for everybody. That's the guy that asked me how I'm doing. That's the guy that told me about Jesus. You can have a huge influence right there where you are. And then, of course, as people become followers of Jesus, where do they want to be? With God's people. And then they show up here on Sunday. But I think if we just talk about our event on Sunday morning, we know we're more than that. And we know if it's just about an event, well, there's churches all over the place that have pretty fancy Sunday mornings. The truth is, we don't win that. If it's just about an event, you know, probably some big community church does Sunday morning pretty cool. So that's not us. But we can tell people about Jesus. We can help them find themselves living in God's story. And when we do that, there's actual real life transformation. So that's why small groups are so important because, well, I'm doing all my slides without looking at them. Here, let's just do it. I think the church runs on two rails. I think there's the attractional piece, which is what we do together on Sunday morning. And it's important, I think, to do that well, to have good singing, to have good preaching, to have good fellowship and good community. And that's what the churches of Christ are great at. I think we have the best preaching in all the world. I think we have the best singing in all the world. And I cannot imagine living my life anywhere else than in the church. I'm 60. I've been Church of Christ since I was probably, my first time I was in church, I was probably 5 days old. So I've been here the whole time, and I love it. And I can't imagine being raised in any other community. And so, but that's the attractional piece. That's this. All right, it's our assemblies, it's our children's program, whatever you might have. It's our youth group, if you have something like that. It's adult Bible classes. It's Wednesday night classes. It's any special events that you may have. At our church, we have lots of special events. We have lots of singings where we can invite our friends and neighbors. We do them indoors. We do them outdoors. Lots of things like that. Those are the events that we do so that we can invite our friends and neighbors. And those things are vital, but that's only one rail that the church runs on. The other rail, I am convinced, is discipleship. And that, I like to characterize it as that last dot. It's what we do Monday through Saturday. It's us being the church all week long. It's small groups, which we're going to talk about the details of that. At our church, we have something called discipleship groups as well. Let me go ahead and define that for you. If small groups are you inviting your friends and neighbors to come over and do a Bible study with you, for us, discipleship groups might be when just the guys get together. Because sometimes guys just need to get together and talk about Jesus. And it's just when the girls get together and there's some things they need to talk about. So for us, and I'll define that a little bit more later, it's just a smaller group of people. It's those 3 or 4 guys that I really just share life with in a big way. Discipleship are those Bible studies that happen around your kitchen table. That's the evangelistic aspect of discipleship. It's those Bible studies that you start at your work during the lunch hour, or maybe before you clock in, or whatever the nature of your work is. That's discipleship. When you do it, it's when you take the church into the marketplace or into your house. That's what I mean when I say discipleship. It's any relational environment where you share life for the purpose of introducing people to Jesus, but also to help them grow. Again, help them discover who they were really created to be. It's what we do on Monday through Saturday. Now, I put a little note down there. That is not to say that discipleship doesn't happen on Sunday morning. It does. Some of my favorite memories are sitting, listening to my grandfather sing bass. I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So I led singing for a lot of years at the churches I went to, but it was because I sat next to him. He was modeling for me what singing was supposed to look like in the church, and all I ever wanted was to just sing like him. And then my dad was a pretty good singer, and I'd sit between them, And it was just the neatest thing, the neatest experience in the world. That's discipleship. When I'm an older guy now, so when me as an older guy, when I just help a younger guy learn what it means to be a young man of God, I am doing discipleship. And I will say this, discipleship is not adding just some new thing. All I got to do is just include some young guy in my life, and he will learn what it means to be a person of God. I like to think of discipleship as 70-year-olds helping 50-year-olds become more godly 60-year-olds. I think we just need those kinds of relationships in the church and in our workplaces, in our schools. We've got fourth graders that do Bible studies with other fourth graders. We're going to do that tomorrow. I'm going to show you a Bible study that's just really easy to use. We literally have that. We literally have 8th grade girl Bible studies initiated by 8th grade girls at their school. And it changed. That's had the world just changes when that stuff happens. But that's the Monday through Saturday stuff. Forgive me if I've been a little bit all over the board, but I'm going to bring it all home here in just a minute. But that's what I mean by discipleship. And I think there really is a third rail, because if this is going to happen, we have to constantly be equipping and training people to do these things. If I want an 8th grade girl Bible study to be happening at the middle school over here, then I've got to be training some 8th grade, well, not me, but somebody needs to be training an 8th grade girl on how to lead a Bible study with other 8th grade girls. If I want a Bible study happening at whatever company over here, I need to be training men on how to lead Bible studies. And I've got to give them a study, like think back to those Joel Miller days. I got to give them something they can use, that they know how to use, that you don't have to have a degree from a Christian university to do. It's got to be something everybody can do. And the tool we're going to share with you tomorrow is such a tool. It's a tool that anybody can use to create a spiritual conversation where you're talking about God, you're talking about Jesus, and we can all do it. Every one of us can do it. I'll talk more about it tomorrow. But we have to constantly be training people in the spirit of Ephesians 4, where it's in that verse where he says, some of you are apostles and prophets and evangelists and shepherds and teachers. Is that APEST? Yeah, I spelled it right. And the job of those people is to equip the church to be able to be the church. And this is like my favorite thought in the world. I mentioned my grandfather a minute ago. My last name's Magnusson. That's a Swedish name. He was a Swedish immigrant. His name was Gunnar Magnusson, and I named my son after him. And when he first came to America, he was in Birmingham, Alabama. He had a brother that had already come over. He didn't speak any English, but he's just there. He's just one of those immigrants, that Ellis Island type folks. So he's working during the week. By the way, he worked for Otis Elevators for 50 years, and to this day, if I get on an elevator, I look to see if it's an Otis elevator. There's a couple other companies. I don't trust them. It has to be an Otis elevator, because that's where Papa worked. But anyway, he would sit on his front porch on Sunday morning. He was raised a marginal Lutheran, so he knew who Jesus was, but he just wasn't raised with a lot of knowledge. Anyway, he would see this pretty girl walk by every Sunday morning when he's sitting on the porch, and he's doing his best to talk to her in his whatever English he could put together. And I guess I'm going to jump ahead. I'm talking about my future grandmother here. But she finally just was able to communicate to him, if you want to talk to me, we're headed to church. And so that's how they would meet. They would walk together to church. So he becomes a Christian. The rest of that story is he was an elder for like 40 years. So when I was talking about giving some to be apostles and prophets and evangelists and shepherds and teachers, our neighborhoods are filled with people that don't know they're a shepherd in God's church. They might just be sitting on a front porch, piddling their life away, not knowing that God created them to be a teacher of God's people or a shepherd. They're all out there. They just don't know it yet. And what a blessing when we help them find themselves living smack in the middle of God's story and help them to become who they were created to be. I don't know where your story started. I've kind of described, at least on my father's side, where my story started. It started with my grandmother inviting my Swedish immigrant grandfather to come to church. He ends up being an elder in Birmingham churches for years, decades and decades. But he could have spent his whole life never knowing Jesus. He would have never been an elder. Anyway, I just think my happiest thought is when we share Jesus with other people, we're finding future elders. And I just think that's a cool thought. And I had another fun thought. Oh, when you share Jesus with another person, you're never just sharing it with them, because here's my grandmother sharing it with my grandfather. And for what it's worth, I'm still here 60 years later talking to wonderful people about Jesus. I mean, it's a generational thing. When you tell a man and a woman about Jesus and they have a kid, that kid's life has changed forever. He's raised in the church now with God's people, and it just continues and continues. And maybe you know where that story started for you, but what I'm encouraging us to be is the start of that story for somebody else. Take the blessing that God has given us. All right, so now I just want to forget the slides. I want to talk a little bit about how important the church is. Because, guys, we get to share life together in a way that most people in our neighborhoods and our coworkers, they just don't get to do that. But they all have the same life experiences that we do. Here's an example. There are people in this room that have heard the word cancer from a doctor, I'm sure. Well, there's people in your neighborhood did too. When you heard the word, you came here and you asked a bunch of other people, hey, let me tell you what I'm going through. And a bunch of other people rallied around you. You knew they were praying for you, and you just got to share that with them as best you could. Well, when that happens with your neighbors, because they hear it too, they don't get to do that. So I think just one of the most beautiful values of the church is that we get to live life together in a completely different way. When I talked this morning, I'm not trying to make us all feel sad all of a sudden, but the talk I gave this morning was with my son-in-law. We gave a talk together. He lost his middle son last year, my grandson. And so we gave a testimony to God's faithfulness as we were going through that experience. I can't imagine having that experience if I hadn't had God's people all around me. But I know other people have lost grandkids, and maybe they didn't have God's people all around them. But wow, you can share that with your friends and neighbors. That's how valuable what you experience here as a family is. It's worth sharing with other people. My job over the next 2 days is to at least spark some ideas and give you a few tools to maybe get you started. All right, and so one of those tools is small groups. All right, so yeah, we got to the third rail, training and equipping. We just have to constantly be helping each other develop as followers of Jesus and give and help each other get comfortable with these tools. And so at my church, we do it on Wednesday nights. So you can see the fun little word play here. Wednesday nights are discipleship training for us. We try to encourage people to understand how to share their witness. And I'm going to talk about that in a sermon tomorrow. But basically, your witness is you testifying to what you have seen, heard, and experienced of God as being a follower of Jesus. And you've got a story. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. We talk about evangelism. You know, how to spark those conversations where we can begin talking to other people about Jesus. And there's tools that help us do that. And I'll try to share some of that as I'm here. And then discipleship. How do you help people grow as followers of Jesus? It's a lifetime of growing and maturing, of learning over time what it means to be a fully committed follower of Jesus. And that conveniently, WED, is Phil's Wednesday. There's even a triple entendre because we're the bride of Christ. So you kind of have a wed thing going there too. So I always thought that was a little bit of fun. So if you're wondering after we talk about all this, well, when do we get to equip ourselves on this? Wednesday night sounds like a good time. It works for us. let's talk about why we want to think small. So obviously my play on words here as a think about small groups or think small. If I was going to continue that sentence, I would say think small but dream big. I think I keep jumping ahead. Forgive me for my rambling. I've a lot of driving today. All right, when we think small, we employ the same methods that Jesus used. While Jesus occasionally did preach to large crowds, and we know that, he primarily conducted his ministry through small groups, and there's a lot of examples of that. When he called his first disciples, it's just this band of 12 people, traveling the countryside, and they're learning from him just by watching Jesus. There's examples of him in the home of Simon the leper. I love the meal stories in the Gospel of Luke. There are 10 meal stories, and they're all there. They're all just really special. And I'm thinking about the one where Matthew has the story of Matthew when Jesus is eating with tax collectors and sinners. They accuse him of hanging out with the wrong people, but Jesus is just sitting around a table sharing life with a group of people. There's 10 of those type of stories in the Gospel of Luke, but what we see Jesus doing is spending time with people away from the assembly. So think of the Sermon on the Mount as the big assembly. And certainly God does some great things in assembly. Think of in Acts 2 when Peter stands up on the steps of the temple. Thousands of people gave their lives to Christ that day. So good things happen in big assemblies. But also think of Acts chapter 2. What was the church doing in Acts chapter 2, verses 42 to 47? It said they were devoted to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. And it goes on to just describe how the church was. They continued meeting daily with one another. They would meet in the temple courts. They would meet in each other's homes. Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke, and he wrote Acts. So all those meal stories back in Luke, in Acts, the church is just doing what they had already been doing with Jesus. Just doing life together, having relationship in a really special way, building a community kind of door to door and house to house. You have to remember, they didn't have church buildings at all. I mean, the notion of a church building, I imagine, would be a foreign concept. It was in the church for hundreds of years. I mean, I don't know all the history of how the church developed, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't until Constantine kind of legalized Christianity in the Roman Empire that we started meeting in buildings. Before that, we were meeting in homes. So it was kind of a house-to-house, door-to-door kind of ministry, and that's how Christ, how the church grew. But think about how much it grew. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think... so in Acts, they talk about, the 72, then you get to the 3,000. There were like 1 million followers of Jesus by 100 years later. And that's without Christian universities, without church buildings, without the Gospel Advocate or whatever magazine that we use here. None of those tools were available, yet there were 1 million people professing Jesus in the Roman Empire, plus it was illegal. To do it. Somehow the church grew, and it grew because everybody who followed Jesus somehow had the ability to communicate to other people, this is for you too, and you want to be a part of this. And they were such good people, and so they just won the world over. Anyway, so when we think small like that, when we think about, as opposed to the big assembly, when we think about just sharing Christ with a coworker, neighbor, or friend, we're doing what Jesus did. He modeled that for us, just kind of sharing life together. I don't know if y'all watch this show, and I'm not endorsing the show, but I do enjoy The Chosen because it shows that. It just shows Jesus and these apostles just working through all these situations together, and they are just watching him, and they just want to be like him. And I think that's still how it works. You are the people of God. I think people want to watch you, and as you're like Christ, they want that too. They want to learn how to be a woman of God. They want to learn how to be a man of God. And they learn that from just sharing life, Monday through Saturday, I think. By the way, don't hear me demeaning Sunday. I love Sundays. Sunday to me is the greatest moment of the week because it's the celebration. It's just the celebration of what God's been doing all week long. I love the gathering. It's one environment I think we all need, but we need some of these other ones too. And I think that's what I'm trying to show the value of. When we think small, we recognize that the early church met and flourished for centuries in small group environments. I guess I've just been describing that. When we think small, we understand that the world is filled with lonely people who are desperate for real relationships based on biblical principles. I've skipped the whole social media thing. As I look around the room, I imagine we have some people who are really good at it, and we got some other people that don't even know what I'm talking about. But people live life kind of, on the internet in a lot of ways now. And they're discovering they're very lonely as they do that. They're not making real connections with each other. But the kinds of connections that the world is really seeking are those, I love, based on biblical principles of love, of care for one another. That's what the church does, and that's what we have to offer people, of purpose. God, when Jesus gave us the Great Commission, man, he gave every one of us purpose and passion for our lives. So whatever we are, if we're mechanics or if we're librarians or teachers or whatever vocation we have, we do that. We're all bivocational. I heard just a little while ago. We're all bivocational. We're that, plus we're disciple makers for Jesus. Okay. When we think small, we create environments where the Bible can be explored and applied, not just learned. The gospel we hear on Sunday morning is applied throughout the week in our small groups. So we're going to get to kind of what are people studying in small groups in just a minute, but I just want to talk about what this idea of not just learned. And again, on Sunday morning, I was a song leader for 20 years in the church. I remember I was with a group of people after church. We were eating lunch together. I said, I'm just curious, can anybody name one song we sang this morning? And nobody could, not a thing. And that just reminded me that while I love this big experience, we do it and we enjoy it while we're there, but we need other environments where it can really stick, where we can really drive these principles and these ideas home. And I think that's what happens in small groups. When I've got a group of people sitting around my living room, we can talk about maybe the sermon that morning, and we can ask each other, how are we going to live that this week? The preacher talked about, let me think of a good topic. Preacher talked about mercy this morning. How can we show mercy to each other? And then how can we show mercy to our neighbors? And how can we show mercy to we can have those discussions where we really apply the great sermons that we hear on Sunday morning. And so the Word of God becomes more than informational, it becomes transformational, I think, when we create these environments where we can apply it. And I think that's what we're allowed to do in the small group environment, because we're just sitting around our kitchen table, we're sitting around on couches in our living room, however that works out, and we're sitting on park benches outside. We're sitting at, what's a restaurant y'all have here? What's a popular restaurant around here? What did you say? Yeah, we're at that place. And we're just sitting, talking to each other. We're talking about Jesus across the table. I think we need to create those opportunities so that we can apply the good lessons that we're being taught on Sunday mornings. It allows us to develop leaders from every demographic and walk of life within our church in order to accomplish the mission. It really is transformative. I can be a person that shows up every Sunday, Wednesday, and Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. I can do that, and I'm a faithful attender. But I don't know if I'm growing as a leader. When you guys start training small group leaders, what you're going to see is you're just growing leadership. people are taking on roles that that give them a bigger impact where they are, in their neighborhoods, in their workplaces, and all of that. Because we can get into that habit of just showing up for the church experience, I remember somebody telling me at a church, I guess he hadn't been asked to lead prayer or something like that, and he goes, I don't know if I like going to this church. You never get to do anything. And I remember thinking, do you think all that there is to do at church is lead the prayer on Sunday morning? Like, is that your Christian service, is leading the prayer? I mean, I wanted the guy to lead a prayer. I don't know why he hadn't got to, and he probably had. He just didn't do it as much as he wanted to. But I remember thinking, surely you don't think that that's all there is to following Jesus, is getting to say the prayer, once a month or whatever on Sunday morning. Surely you know that it's all these other things that we've been talking about. That's what it means to be a follower of Jesus. I highlight Acts 4:13. Y'all remember Peter at the end of Luke? He's not doing too good. He's been following Jesus around for 3 years or so. That's how we estimate it. So he's been following Jesus around, but in the big moment, he denies Jesus 3 times after he'd talked big the night before, and he had said, I'll be with you unto death. And Jesus goes, Peter, I appreciate what you're saying, but you're going to pretend you don't even know me 3 times before, the rooster crows in the morning. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. And so that's Peter at the end of Acts. But then, as the story continues, Jesus does appear again to Peter. Jesus appears to Peter before the ascension, and so some things are changing. And somehow in those 40 days or whatever between the time Jesus was crucified and he ascended into heaven, or he was resurrected and ascended into heaven, something happens to Peter. He goes from being a guy just tagging along. Now he's a bold leader standing out on the steps of the temple preaching that sermon that we read about in Acts 2. And the guy that was denying he even knew Jesus, a month and a half earlier, is now saying, everybody in the sound of my voice, you are sinners, and lest you repent and be baptized, you're going to die separated from God. I mean, some kind of crazy transformation happened. And then by the time we get to Acts 4, he and John heal somebody at the Beautiful Gate. I think that's where that story happens. I may be combining stories, but they heal a guy, and the Sanhedrin hears it. They call him in. They say, look, you guys got to stop doing that. It's time for y'all to stop. And Peter now, bold Peter, says, how can we stop talking about everything that we've seen and heard? I mean, you can threaten us with anything you want to. We're not going to stop talking about what God has done in us. And so when you give people the work of being a small group leader, you really are training a leader because they have more responsibility. And that's men and women. We have unique responsibilities, but we just grow in our responsibility and our care for each other. As women care for women, men care for the men in the church. And we just all get better at being the church when we have these kinds of responsibilities. And I think it's a really, really incredible tool for training leaders. Small groups are great for that. Small groups empower every member of our church to join the mission. We've talked about that. In our small groups, when we initially start, we're probably going to start with each other. But I do want to encourage you that you really want to be inviting the people that aren't there. You can start here, get comfortable, live life together, share life. It'll be meaningful for you. But I would always think about who's not there and who could be there. And because some people will be very intimidated to come into here because they don't know the songs. They just don't know what they're supposed to do. When do you stand? When do you sit? They don't know all that stuff. But they can navigate your living room because they're your friend. They can do that. And that's another value of small groups. It's a chance for people to dip their toe into what it means to be the church without starting here, which could be pretty intimidating. Okay. All right, and I actually wrote this some time ago because you'll see the pandemic stuff, but when we think small, we create a pandemic and persecution-proof church that can continue to grow even when we can't meet in large groups. Y'all remember? I don't even want to say it out loud because it just makes me miserable to think of the whole COVID thing and the masks and all that. That was such a hard time. My goodness, I mean, that was hard on a bunch of different levels. But there was a stretch there where the church literally couldn't meet, and you're thinking, what in the world? The church is not meeting? You know, I don't know how long that was for y'all. We're in Tennessee. It was, I don't know, for some little stretch, we weren't meeting. And then we started meeting outdoors and all that kind of stuff. But the crazy, our elders came to me, and because I was working with the small groups a bit, and they said, look, you're going to give every one of our small group leaders a promotion. They are now the front lines because we cannot meet in the big assembly. We're meeting in homes for as far as we can tell, the foreseeable future. And the small group leaders are the only people who can keep this church going by keeping these small groups of 10, 15, 20 people meeting in their homes. And so we went from a church that had small groups, we became a church that was small groups. And I am not exaggerating when I say we were bigger after COVID than we were before. And it's because everybody was just evangelizing their neighbors. That's all we could do. We couldn't do this. And y'all remember that. Nobody could do this. But because we had this commitment to small groups, we were able to, basically inspire our small group leaders to go be the church right there where you are. And we actually came out on the other side, a bigger church. When we finally all got back in the same room, it was crazy. We were like, I don't even know those people over there. And like, well, they were part of, so-and-so small group. And so, yeah, they're here now. Yeah, so, and that was pretty neat. And, I don't know what the future holds, if there's some level of persecution for the church. But if we can't do this, we can always do the other. Okay. There are a couple of models of small groups. One is the Acts 2. That's the life together, where we devote ourselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. I call that the Acts 2 life together model, and that's the one we see described. But there's also this missional model. And I will tell you, you have to work hard to be a missional model of a small group. Because when you have a small group and you are sharing life, you're sharing stories, you know each other well, and it feels weird when somebody else comes into the small group. It just feels, it kind of catches you off guard. So you really do have to work on that in your training. What do we want new people to come? How do we make them feel welcome? And so we're going to talk about that more as we go along. But it is a bit, I will argue, most small groups have to force themselves to be evangelistic. They really do, because you enjoy the thing you have, whether you're doing a Bible study together or whatever, and you have to make yourself invite the friends and the neighbors. But ultimately, you want that to happen. And when you do, that's when the church grows. So I presented as two different philosophies, but the truth is, every small group wants to be an Acts 2 small group, and that's okay, but you definitely need some Matthew 28 type small groups. And I'll give you a strategy for that here in just a minute. Okay. So let's talk about just the formats of small groups. You guys will figure this out for yourself. What I'm about to present is not what you guys are going to do. I'm just presenting some stuff that we did as food for thought. Okay, and then you guys will figure out what it looks like for you guys. For us, the rhythm of small groups is we generally meet once a week as a small group. And for us, we pick any day, whatever day works. Sometimes it's on Sundays, sometimes it's on, we have small group. I had a college-age small group that we met on Wednesday nights for 4 years. We met away from the church building. But we had like 28 people for 4 years. It was a really cool environment. But for us, we pick any day. Many people do prefer Sunday evenings because that's just a regular church time. But then when you start doing that, the question becomes, well, what about Sunday night church? And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. All right. Time. Small groups typically last about an hour and a half. I know of groups that go longer than that. But I would tell you, nobody will say it, but people don't like it. When a small group starts lasting 2.5 hours every Sunday, I just don't think people like that very much. But they'll never tell you they don't, but they'll just stop coming. So I encourage small groups to, kind of run a pretty tight ship, 60 minutes, 90 minutes. You have to decide whether you want, well, let me get them all up there. They're longer if a meal is included. My small group, we do dessert. That we don't do a full meal. Now, some people do. And I've been in small groups where you do a meal. But again, that's work for somebody. Somebody's making that, and you can alternate it around or whatever. And some small groups thrive doing that. But I'm just saying, in my experience with my small group, we do dessert. And so figure everybody can eat some other time, and we do our dessert, we have our fun talk, and then we do our Bible study together. That's how we do small group. Generally, groups 6 to 16 people feels about right. The problem is if you all have kids, and I know there's some folks in here that probably have, kids, and so a group can get really big if you have 16. So if you have 8 couples and you all have 3 kids, there's a bunch of people all of a sudden in the room. So we're going to talk about that too. But generally, a group, as far as group sizes, 6 to 16 people feels pretty good. Once you get over 20, that's when you talk about multiplying. Let's birth another small group. So I don't think I have slides for this, so I just want to say this. Every group ought to have a host. So that's whose house that it's at. Somebody serves as the host. They don't have to be the leader. They're the people who have the gift of hospitality. Hey, you guys come to my house. I hate teaching, but I love, fixing dessert and inviting people over, so that you have a host. And then you have a leader, somebody who's, their job is to kind of keep things moving, keep the discussion going, maybe develop the study, those kinds of things. But the most important role that we can get lost on is the apprentice, the person who's learning to be a leader. And we try to start with all 3 of those, because what we tell people is, hey, when this group hits 20 people, we're multiplying into 2 groups. And that's when the apprentice now becomes the leader. And then the 2 leaders have to find new apprentices. And then that's just how it continues to grow. Because you cannot have more small groups than you have leaders. You just can't. And I don't know how many you guys are planning to have, but you have to constantly be preparing and training people to lead a small group, because you can't have another small group if you don't have another leader. And so the apprentice method ensures that you're always training the next leaders. Curriculum-wise, at our church, we primarily, our preachers, we have different people who speak, but the way we do it is they write a little small group guide for discussion based on the sermon that morning. Does 2 things. One, it encourages people to go to church on Sunday morning, but also it gives you a chance to apply those lessons that you talked about on Sunday night. So the small group guide, it might be, a list of 8 questions, another scripture reading, that is based on the sermon from that morning. That works good for us. We don't make everybody do that, but most people do. But, you can study a book. You can study a book of the Bible together. You can study a book that, a Christian book that people like. You can look a lot of different ways, but the sermon guide is a really, really, really handy way to do that. And I'll say this. If you're able to do this, it's really nice. You're not going to love this, but our preachers will record like a little 10-minute kind of mini sermon for the small group, so you can just watch that. The preacher does his thing, and then there's a bunch of questions just based on that. It's tough. Just depending what time will allow, but that's also very helpful. So here's some options. Discovery Bible Study is the method we're going to work on tomorrow afternoon. And I know it's something that Derek said you guys have, he's wanting to introduce to you guys. So that's another method, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. There's obviously a ton of small group series just out there from different publishers that you can order. You can get video series, different books, okay? Here's a question that comes up when we talk about small groups. Kind of, what's the calendar? Once you start meeting, do you ever stop meeting? we try to give permission for there to be a summer break and a December break. What we have discovered is generally our small groups will have Christmas kind of parties together and that sort of a thing. But we give all the groups permission to, hey, if you don't want to meet in June and July, just don't meet. Just take a 2-month break from the small groups, and people will do other things. But that way, because sometimes, people are just traveling, and it's just kind of hard to keep things going. So we give them a chance to take a break. We launch small groups every August. We always have a preaching series that's special, that's recruiting small group leaders and people to sign up for small groups. And we launch them in August, and it's always a short series. It's just like 6 weeks. Try small groups for 6 weeks. And if you don't like them, it's over. You did it for 6 weeks, and now it's over. You never have to do it again. But people like the idea. That's called a sunset period. Like, I'll try it, but I'm not signing up for my whole life. I'll just go try it for a little while. But what happens is, we start all these new small groups. We say they're going to last 6 weeks, and 3 years later, they're still meeting. That's generally what happens. And then we do the short series, and then we stop for December. So we start in August, we stop, give everybody a break in December, and then we relaunch in January. That way, if you hate the group you're in, you can switch. It's true. Like, yeah, I like small groups, but there's a couple of reasons I don't particularly like this group, but I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But then we just relaunch them in January, and you get a chance to clean it up a little bit. New groups can start just any time. If somebody's ready to start a group and they can find folks to be a part of it, then by all means, just go for it. You don't have to do that August, January thing if you don't want to. I like having a model group that always meets at the building. It's when you have visitors on Sunday morning, it's a good chance for you to invite them to, hey, we'd love to have you to come to small group. We got a group that's meeting right here at the building tonight. We'd love to have you come. And so I know y'all got classrooms and space over here. So we actually have a couple of classrooms that are built to look like living rooms. They got couches and all that stuff. So it feels very homey. But that is a great small group to have just for somebody who's just wanting to try it out and see what it's like. And so you have somebody with a real evangelistic kind of mindset, maybe running that small group, and they know they're going to have new people. I think it's good to have, all right, all small group leaders, you should show up at church every Sunday looking for people that you would love to join your small group. So that's part of the characteristic of a good small group leader, is they're just eyes up looking for new people. And so some new person comes in, hey, so glad you're here with us today. We're going to talk about that great sermon tonight. I'd love to have you come over. We're having brownies and ice cream. It's going to be a great night. Here's my address. Hope you're going to be there, that kind of a thing. But every small group leader, I think, should be like that, just constantly inviting people and helping them to get engaged. But have one that meets at the building, because it can be intimidating also to go to your house. They don't know you yet, but they'll come back here. They've already come there, so they'll come back here, and then they'll just go to that little small group that meets down in the classroom. So that can be their introduction. I talked about the difference between discipleship groups and small groups. So this alternating weeks, we did this with my college kids. I said I had a really big group. We had 20 to 28 people on any given week. What we would do is every other week, this group actually did eat together. It was college students. You can't get them to leave. So, this was a long, small group. It breaks every rule that I've said earlier, but it was fun. And we had food because college kids want food. But what we would do is every other week, we would meet all together on first and third Sundays. So all the guys, all the girls, we'd all be in the same room together. But on second and fourth, my wife would take the girls and I would take the guys. And we'd go in different parts of the house. We would do exactly the same study. So me and the guys were always on the back porch. We had this loft area in our house, and my wife and the girls were always up there. We're doing the exact same study. But it is amazing because, me and my wife are talking afterwards, the difference in the discussion. Like she would say, yeah, since there were no guys in the room, this is what we talked about. And the guys are like, well, since we didn't have to impress the girls, this is what we talked about. And there's just stuff that guys are challenged by that they need to discuss with each other, and there's just things that girls need to talk about with each other, and there's certainly things that girls and guys, especially college age, don't need to be talking about in the same room at the same time. And so we were able to do that, and I liked that rhythm because we were doing the same studies. We kept the same rhythm, but we just did it separately. It was amazing how different the conversations were. So that worked good for us. And I said that as college students, but I think it would work for any age. I think I'm 60. I think a bunch of 60-year-old men, I like talking to just a bunch of 60-year-old men sometime without having a bunch of 60-year-old women in the room, and we can just have our talk and they can have their talk, and we all grow and mature as followers of Jesus that way. Okay, so here's some questions that you guys will ask each other. So what's a group going to look like? Is it going to be age specific, or maybe you want it to be multi-generational? It is hard to force it to be anything, but you can describe a characteristic like, or maybe it's an affinity group. So what I mean by all that is, I think the thought of it being multi-generational sounds great to everybody, but the reality is, I'll use this example. At my church, every Bible class we have was a young marrieds class when it started. Our 80-year-olds meet in a house called the John's House. They were 80 years ago, or 70, 60 years ago, they were all part of this young marrieds class that met in this home. The last name was John's, and so they still call themselves the John's House. But it's that way with everything. People just there's a kind of an affinity thing. Young moms want to hang out with other young moms. They just do. And we tell ourselves, no, we need grandparents, we need parents, we need kids in every small group. If you pull that off, then you've pulled off a miracle, because we've tried it a million times. And we do have a few groups that are like that, but generally, people really do just kind of flock together with people who are having the similar life experiences to them. And it's not a bad thing, because as my example was, that John's House class, they've been together for 60 years. Those guys have met their spouses together. They've been in each other's weddings. They've had their children together. They've sent them off to college together. They've become grandparents together. They're the coolest class in the whole church because they've just shared life all the way through. And anyway, they started as a young marriage group, and I think that's how all of our classes have started. So, but you need to decide. For instance, we will have small groups where they say we're young families with children. Okay, that's important to do that. To say that's who we think this group is, or we're young couples without kids. We're not equipped to handle kids. There's no kids in this group. It's okay to say that. I mean, just because we're going to get to kids in a minute, that is the hardest part of small groups. Absolutely. Figuring out what to do with kids is the hardest part of small groups, because what will happen, and I am looking at the younger couple, I don't know if y'all have kids or whatever, but you end up just having to alternate around. And so this week, this couple is with the kids. Next week, somebody else is with the kids. That's generally what happens. And you find some activity for them. But it is a struggle with everybody. There's a friend of mine at a big old church down where we live. They just built a building, and the building is full of little living rooms. They've made it where they got partitioned walls, and they can do all this fancy stuff. But they make all the rooms look like living rooms. And I'm like, why did y'all do that? Why don't you just meet in living rooms? It's like, we couldn't figure out what to do with the kids. So we have a babysitting service that everybody comes in, they check out their kids, and then they go to do their small group. And it's just a building full of small groups happening. But what they've done is they've combined all the kids together in a children's program. And that's just how they did it. If you solve the kids part of this, you will write a book, because everybody struggles with the kid part of small groups. But my kids love small group. They're best friends to this day. We're from small groups, and my grandkids are having the same experience. So you can make it work, but it is a struggle. All right, that's what we just talked about. We talked about curriculum already. We talked about when you should multiply. Hogs and sheep. It's just a tacky way of saying a leader's job is to keep one person from hogging the whole group, and that can happen. Somebody, just their thing, they want it talked about, and so they just hog. They do all the talking. But then you also have people that just don't want to say a word. So part of the skill of a small group leader is making, drawing the people who don't like to talk, drawing them into the conversation, but also not allowing anybody else to just kind of hog all the time, because I've experienced both for sure. Should we serve food? If you want to. But I don't think you should feel compelled to. You shouldn't have to, but if you want to, do it. Where should we meet? Are we going to meet here at the building somewhere? Are we going to meet in a home? I think homes is like the ideal situation. But there are choices to be made. How's the room going to be set up? It's just the best way to have conversation, I think. Should we take time off? We talked about that. Give people a chance to take a break. What about Sunday night church? Let's talk about that one. So here's what happened, Fred. We kept Sunday night church, but we encouraged people to be in Sunday, to be in small groups on Sunday nights at the same time. All right, I'm going to tell a story, and then I'm going to circle back. So I was a song leader at our church. Was one of my big jobs, and I remember feeling inspired one night because Sunday night attendance, just wasn't what it used to be. And I remember I wrote up this document of this is how we're going to fix Sunday night church. And I took it to my preacher, and he looked at it, he goes, you're not asking the right question, are you? Don't you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's a work of art that I just handed you. That is how we're going to fix Sunday night church. He said, you should be asking, how are we going to use Sunday nights to make disciples? Because remember back when we said, what's our business and how's business? The only question we had to answer is, what's Jesus calling us to do is to make disciples. So you need to think about how can we use Sunday nights more effectively to make disciples. All right, so that's worth remembering in this discussion, because do y'all have Sunday night church now? Okay, so you have Sunday night church. And so I imagine it is a concern, well, if we start doing this, less people will come on Sunday night. Okay, but what if they're growing as followers of Jesus because they're just in a different environment? That was the goal to start with. It wasn't to, increase our count on Sunday night. But here's the deal, still count them. Here's what you'll find out. So let me just pick a number. I have no idea what your numbers are, but let's just say you have 50 people that show up on Sunday night. You just start doing small groups on Sunday night, and you count all of them, you'll have 100 people. All of a sudden, 100 people are engaged with the church on Sunday night. Now, I know that's a sensitive topic, and y'all need to hear me say I am not downplaying the importance of the assembly. I'm just saying our goal was never assembling for the sake of assembling. Our goal was always to grow as followers of Jesus Christ. We invented this. We just have to understand the early church never did this, ever. We invented it, and it's wonderful and it's good, but we need to ask ourselves the question, how can we use Sunday nights to help people grow and mature as followers of Jesus Christ? The fact that they're having a Bible study in a home might be just the thing, because they bring their neighbor with them. Hey, come to this Bible study. Join me for this. And then all of a sudden you look up and the church is growing, and Sunday mornings are getting bigger again and all that because of this tool, small groups that you're using. So it can be very valuable. We do this. We offer online options. We have some weird small groups. We have, because during COVID, we really embraced the whole online thing of just trying to help people get connected. We were stunned at where people were showing up from. So we have one small group that's made up of a person from Romania, a person from Kenya, and a person from, there's a country called Namibia. They're scattered through all this, but they're all in the same time zone, turns out. And we just lead it online, and it's the coolest Bible study ever. We just have a Bible study every Tuesday in that time zone, and it's really cool. So that's why that's up there. It's just something God's brought us, since COVID. We all figured out how to do Zoom suddenly, and so that's just a way to use Zoom. All right, that's all I've got. As far as this discussion, I just want to encourage you that small groups can be a very valuable tool to help you reach more people for Jesus. And I hope I've expressed some of the reasons why that is. It's a tool for disciple making. The goal is not small groups. The goal is to make and help introduce people to Jesus and help them grow as followers of Jesus. What I've tried to express is it'll help us grow. We're going to be the leaders. It's going to help us mature. It's given us a job, a very important job. But the big job is going to those coworkers, classmates, and neighbors and saying, hey, I got a group of folks coming over to the house tonight. I'd love for you to come join us. You'd love them. It's a great bunch of people. We're going to eat dessert together, and we don't have all the answers. We're going to try to find God together. Love to have you come and join us for that. And then watch what God does when you take a bold step like that. I don't know about you guys, how maybe everybody in here is really bold, but I've been very not bold a lot in my life. And I've just kind of fell into the rhythms of going to church and trying to being a good guy. But I missed the call of Jesus to go and make disciples. And so maybe this is a tool that can be helpful for you guys. Do y'all have any questions that maybe I should answer? Because I think we're waiting on pizza, right? Yeah. So we got time. If y'all got any questions that I can answer or anything that I didn't express clearly. Yes, sir. Ooh. Okay, we've kept this at different points in the life of our church, but okay. I would say 75% of our church is in a small group. Now, how faithfully they attend it would be another question. But I would say 3 out of 4 people at our we had to grow into small groups because we were a Sunday morning, Sunday night church, and so that it was a big move to do it. And when you start hearing the stories though, and then it starts becoming a little bit infectious, then you're like, okay, I'll give this a try. I'll check it out. I get it. Change is hard when you try something new, but when you start seeing the value of it, then you're like, okay, how did we ever do it any other way? This is really cool. But I'd say about 75% of our church is involved in a discipleship group and or a small group. But again, their level of faithfulness to that probably varies to some degree. I have a friend who has a church, and this is going to sound over the top, but I'm just telling you about their attitude about it. I said, what percentage of your members go to small group? He said, I don't understand the question. And I said, what percentage of your church go to small groups? He goes, you have to be in a small group to be a member of our church. Thought that was an interesting kind of approach, way to think about it. Like, you got to be doing this, or to us you're just an attender, but I'm not saying that y'all should look at it that way. I'm just saying that's an example of people's thoughts about this. For us, it's a new thing. Just give it a try and see what happens. See how God uses it. I think you'll be surprised, because I will say this is an absolute fact, and I'm going to cover this tomorrow morning in class, but there are more people making the decision to follow Jesus today than ever have in the history of the world. That's important because it doesn't sound like it can possibly be true, because we're not experiencing that here in the United States, because we're measuring something different. We're measuring church attendance and things like that. But God is doing great all across Africa. Here is a absolutely true statement that you're not going to believe is true. There are more Muslims making the decision to follow Jesus today than have in the last 14 centuries combined, times 10. All right, that's a true statement. What it means is there was a point in history where the Muslim world was just basically, the Mediterranean was just taking in, the Mediterranean and Africa. But there is a move of God all across Africa. I'll use one example because I saw this with my own eyes. I went to Sierra Leone, and if you've ever seen the movie Blood Diamond, if y'all recall that movie from, 15, 20 years ago, it's a hard movie to watch. But that was Sierra Leone. It was 94% Christian and 6% Muslim 20 years ago, and they were engulfed in a civil war. But because of the Christians there, and this is just a fact you can look up on Google, It's about 33% Christian today, 20 years later, where it was only 6%. That represents millions of people. And that's the kind of thing God is doing in certain parts of the world. He's doing it in India, he's doing it in Africa, and he's doing it in South America. People are making the decision to follow Jesus, and they're using small groups. They don't have buildings, in a lot of these places. You'll go and you'll just see people meeting under a tree, and they're a church. There's 25 of them, and they're fired up for Jesus. They're singing the same songs that we're singing. But they don't have the stuff that we have. And sometimes I just wonder, are we measuring the right stuff? Because we keep thinking the goal is Sunday morning, and it is. But the way you get to good Sunday mornings is what we're doing Monday through Saturday. Yeah, Monday through Saturday. That's how you have great Sunday mornings. So I hope I expressed something there. I don't know if I did or not. I might have just been rambling. So any other questions? All right, how many of them gravitated away from Sunday night or towards Sunday night? Right. Oh, ended up being on Sunday night? No, not that many. I mean, they just find the night of the week that works. This is what I'm going to say. I meant to say this a while back. What happened at our church is Sunday night became a small group. Like they still behaved like typical church, where you have the sermon, people that didn't get to take Lord's Supper that morning, they're able to take it stuff. But for all intents and purposes, they were a small group together with each other. It was just the reality of it. They met here, and honestly, we just kind of started thinking of it that way, that this is a small group that is meeting right here at the building. It's an adjustment. It's different. It's a different experience, but I think it's been good for us. It's been really good for us. Yeah. In August, we give everybody a chance to change small groups if they want to. Yeah, if you want to change, they generally don't. But we say it that way. Hey, sign-ups for small groups. If you want to try something new, here's the 5 new small groups we're launching. This August. We'd love for you to be a part of them if you want to. And so we give everybody the chance in August. You have permission to change your group. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Oh, to visit with well, all right, for us, we feel like that's what happens on Sunday morning. That's when we're all seeing each other and doing all this stuff. It happens, yes. I think what she was saying is, once if you get 12 people and y'all just start meeting at one house, do you lose contact with other people? Is that is that become a negative? It's just not a negative. It doesn't it's not in a way, an exclusionary way at all. They just are people sharing life together in a special way on Sunday night. Yes. A lot of times it is. Now, it's not always. I mean, I'm in a small group, and I was part of Sunday night as well. But, hey, I know this is something that you have to wrap your head around, because we've been doing Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday for 100+ years. And we like it. But the reality, again, the goal is not to hit all 3 services. The goal is to grow as followers of Jesus and have the responsibility of telling other people about Jesus and growing. And we celebrate that on Sunday morning. I hope this will be inspirational. I feel like I'm using a bunch of the stuff I intended to use tomorrow, but our typical services at our church start with the announcements of baptisms. We sing one song to get everybody to sit down and hush up and pay attention. But the first thing we always do is let everybody know who got baptized this week. And it's always somebody who came to the church through a small group, and they've been doing a Bible study together, and that's how they made the decision to follow Jesus. And they're sitting right, I'm pointing at you, and they're sitting right there this morning. But this is how they got here. And so Sunday mornings really do become a celebration of what God has been doing all week long. So, your small group may meet like on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or any other day. But what happens is, especially when you start bringing your neighbors in and all that kind of stuff, is the Bible study happens separately from that. So now I'm studying with you. You've come to my small group, and you're like, yeah, I guess I just want to know more. Hey, can I got this 6-week Bible study. Can we do that together? And then you do, and I'm walking you towards baptism, and then you get baptized, and you're a great member of my small group, but now you're part of the church community now. You're sitting there on Sunday morning. And a lot of times you'll get baptized on Sunday morning, but it is fun to be able to say, hey, you remember that Bible study we've been praying about that Joe was doing? Well, he's sitting there with Chris. Chris got baptized on Tuesday night. They came down here to the building. It was a big fun time. It was awesome. And the church, responds to that. And then, we've been praying for this study over there. And they had 3 baptisms this week. And so that's a pretty fun, you can have great church. After you've announced 3 or 4 baptisms, the singing just gets better. I mean, it's just, everybody's happy. I mean, that's what you wanted to see happen anyway, right? Like you wanted, when the preacher said, come now as we stand and sing, the best thing that can possibly happen is somebody come forward and get baptized, right? That's like the best thing. So, but when it's been happening all week long, you can start out the service, we're showing pictures up on the screen, and everybody's just, wow, that happened. And that knothead led them to Christ. That he's not smart enough to lead somebody to Christ, but it turns out he is. That's pretty neat to watch. All right, I don't want to tell all my stories, but I'll share some tomorrow. But remember, small groups are just a tool to help us be more evangelistic and to help all of us grow as followers of Jesus Christ. That's why it is not the goal to have small groups for small groups' sake. They are a tool to accomplish the mission of the church, which is true of Sunday night as well. We don't have Sunday night for Sunday night's sake. Sunday night exists to help people grow and mature as followers of Jesus Christ. This is just another tool. Any other questions as we wait for pizza? Well, I hope God blesses y'all on this adventure. We're going to talk about the tools, the stuff you do tomorrow. We're going to talk about, I'll give some examples of things that we've seen. When God's people embrace his mission, great things happen. And this is one of the ways we can do that. All right, pizza's here. So I don't know what we do now. How do we end? I can pray, and you want me to pray for the pizza too? Okay. Lord, we are so grateful to get to share life together in your church. Lord, we love it so much. We want to share it with everybody else. We want everybody to discover you because you made them, and you want to be close to them, and you want them to celebrate you every day the way we get to. So help us do that. Lord, you provide more than what we need. We're grateful for this food that we're getting to share this evening and the fellowship that we'll have as we're doing it. Thank you for that, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.